ticking clock.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Hanging Out with Chops. I want to say a big shout out to all the new listeners. Thank you for coming back to check out another episode. All right, I think we got a fun one today. I feel like we finally got the ball rolling and we're trucking. I wanted to talk about something different, and I was thinking I wanted to do the top 10 movies where music is the main focus. Top 10 movies where music is the main character. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about some of the plots. So if you haven't seen these movies and you don't want to know what they're about or what's happening, spoiler alert, I am going to be talking about the plot lines of some of these movies. And I picked 10. You know, I really was shooting from the hip on this one, and I just thought of the first 10 movies that I really enjoy watching. These are movies that if they're on TV, I'll usually stop and check them out. You know, some movies use music as background, but in these 10 movies, I feel like the music is the story. Now, in some of these, obviously, you know, there's engineers and there's musicians and that kind of thing. And, well, hey, let's jump into it, okay? Top 10 movies where the music is the star. This is in no particular order. I don't think I have an all-time favorite, but I'd probably say these are my top 10 favorites. In no particular order, here's the first one. The Blues Brothers. If you've never seen The Blues Brothers, you gotta see it. First of all, the music is amazing. Great songs. And amazing cameos. Aretha Franklin. Come on. Ray Charles, James Brown, Cab Calloway, John Lee Hooker. And not just cameos. They're in the movie and they do a whole number. Like a whole song from the beginning to the end. It's not a 10-second little blurb. They do a whole 2-3 minute song. If you've never seen The Blues Brothers, it stars John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. It was made in 1980. And it's basically about two blues musicians, Jake and Elwood. One is just getting released from prison. The brother goes and picks him up. He comes out of prison, and they go back to the orphanage where they grew up at. Found out the orphanage is in trouble. I think they need like $5,000 to keep it open. So what do? We're going to go do a gig. So they have the great plan of, hey, let's put the band back together. So they do. And the majority of the movie is finding the original band. So they try to go find their old bass player and their own horn player and the old keyboard player, and they put their blues band back together. But you do get to see some great musicians. Ray Charles jamming on a real roads. There's a whole joke about it that like Ray Charles actually owns a music store in this movie. And the first cat is like, hey, man, this keyboard's got no action on it. And Ray Charles sits down and says, hey, let me show you a little something. Hold my beer. So anyway, The Blues Brothers, if it's not one you've ever seen, you gotta see it. It's a must-see. Another movie, another one in the top 10, Hustle and Flow. Hustle and Flow came out 2005. It stars Terrence Howard. It has an Oscar-winning song. Now, Hustle and Flow that's one that hits close to home for me. It's a story about a rapper, and it's one that I've seen a lot. You know, I've recorded hundreds of rappers throughout the years. But Hustle and Flow shows the grind that a lot of these guys are willing to go through to make it big. And I've seen it in real life. Whether it's selling drugs or got some weird side hustle. But hey, Hustle and Flow, 2005. And it shows basic plot of this one is it's a pimp. And he's got his stable. But he gets a calling. And he wants a little more out of life than what he currently has. He feels like he's got something in him that he's got to put out. Much like a lot of us. We're in this because we feel like we have something to say, whether it's musically or in lyrics. But this character does have something to say, and he wants to put it down. He wants to put it out on tape. He wants to leave some kind of legacy behind. So he does. He meets an old school friend who happens to do some small little recordings. He records church choirs, but has the ability to put a demo together. Finds another friend of his, or makes a new friend, who's a beat maker. He's got his MPC, he's got a keyboard, and before you know it, they're making beats. They're up and running. They got their first little song, jamming, start figuring out structure, and it's a cool story. I recommend this one for everyone. Hustle and Flow, gotta see it. And in no particular order, next one, Amadeus, 1984. Now, this is a period piece, and it's about Mozart. Great story. Actually, it's more about Salieri. He's actually the one telling the story, and it's two composers: genius Mozart, the guy who could effortlessly create, and then Salieri, the guy who struggles to write. Great disposition. On one hand, just like today, it's that classic guy of, man, even though I practice and practice and practice, I'm not Steve Vai, or I'm not Joe Satch, I'm not Eddie Van Halen. And it's the envy and the jealousy of one man, even though he wants to be so great, and his mediocrity, and an idiot who could just create the most beautiful, beautiful music possible, who's pompous and flamboyant and rude, but yet music just flows out of him effortlessly. The music is awesome. And again, one of those movies that if it's ever on TV, I'll stop and I'll watch it. And plus, period pieces are good to watch. It kind of gives you a good idea of what life in the 18th century was like. We work with everything by LED now, but the majority of that movie's by candlelight. And in no particular order, the next movie, which I think is probably one of the greater ones, Searching for Sugar Man, 2012. If there's one on this list that's a must-see, it has to be this one. Because I couldn't believe that this actually happened. So imagine you're in high school or whatever, I'm just going to put it, a little synopsis of what this movie's about. Imagine when you were in high school, let's say you made a demo, and then you went off with your life. Went to whatever, college, got a regular job, did your job, 20, 30 years, retired, and, here you are in your later years in life. And you probably never even thought twice about that demo. But what if that demo took a life of its own and for some reason became cherished by millions of people? Everyone absolutely loving who you are and what you wrote about and what you sang, but never knowing who you were or what happened to you. That's basically Searching for Sugar Man. The main character's name, or actually not a main character, it's the actual person. His name is Rodriguez. He made an album, I think it's called Colfax. And it sold, a handful of records. Didn't really do much here in the U.S. But one of those pressings, for some reason, made it to Africa. And there, it got repressed into millions of copies. Colfax became one of the biggest albums in Africa. Like, millions of people adored Rodriguez, never even knowing who he was. So a great story about your dream coming true and you never knowing that it actually happened. Can you believe that? Can you believe that actually happened? I couldn't believe it. When I saw this movie, I was like, no way, there is no way that this actually happened, that someone made it made it big and then didn't realize it and had no idea that they made it. Searching for Sugar Man. You gotta watch it, guys. It's so worth the time. The next film, That Thing You Do. That Thing You Do is the classic one-hit wonder story. 1996. And it stars Tom Hanks. You know, this is his little brainchild. Obviously, besides the great music, it's a great story. It's a story we've all seen. You know, probably a lot of us have lived it. Hey, you know, you learn to play guitar, and then you meet a friend who happens to know how to play drums, and then that friend knows another friend that sings, and then you three get together and maybe meet a bass player, or you teach another guy that wants to play guitar, but you don't need another guitar, so you teach him how to play bass. And before you know it, you got a little band. Well, that's this story. It's a friend who has a friend. They put a little band together. Then they decide one day, hey, let's cut a demo. They cut a song, actually 2 songs, an A and a B cut, 45. And then slowly, it starts to get known. It starts to get played on local radio. I think maybe in college radio first, and then local radio. And then it starts to gain speed. Before you know it, a big record label hears it. They sign the band. Huge record deal. Huge tour. Everyone knows who they are. A great story. It's really a love letter to the 60s music explosion. So you see a lot of cameo-esque other bands, and you kind of know who they're referring to, but it's not those bands. But you do see kind of a Beatle-ish type of band, and you do see like a swing band and that kind of thing. But it's a great story on how one hit song rockets a band up the charts. And plus the importance of arrangements and timings and branding, especially branding. Next story, guys. Next movie, actually, I should say. Once, 2007. The great thing about Once is that it has actually two great singers that star in this movie. Glenn, oh man, I hope I don't mess up your name, bro. Glenn Hansard and a girl, Marquette Irglova. Glenn is the singer of The Frames. Anyway, what's cool about this movie, and the name is so appropriate because it's called Once, and it's an album created by these musicians that just happen to click all together at once. It happens to be 2 good songwriters that happen to need a bass player, that happen to need a drummer, that happen to meet an engineer, and they put their money together. And it's a story I've seen a lot. Hey guys, this is the budget. We got so much time. We got to make these songs happen. We have 4 songs, 8 songs, 10 songs. Well, that's what Once is. Outside of it being like a pretty cool love story, the synchronicity that happens between people and attitudes, especially between engineers and musicians, and seeing it all come together for this one time, and it's a true representation of capturing lightning in a bottle. As engineers, Once is probably the one movie that I look at and you would hope that that's what you can get. You happen to be there capturing a recording at their peak, but their peak happens to be the first time they all met. Once, 2007, guys, check it out. It is so worth it. The Commitments, 1991. The Commitments just has such good music. It's set in Dublin. It's a bunch of Dublin cats that want to bring soul to Ireland. For real. If you've never seen The Commitments, the music is so good. As a matter of fact, if there's one soundtrack to get, it's probably, to me, it would be this one, The Commitments. Man, this is such good music. The actual vocals were done by Andrew Strong. That's really him singing. He's got a great voice. If you're a fan of like Wilson Pickett, that style of soul, The Commitments, it's where it's at. So it's actually based on a book. You know, it highlights the messy band dynamics we've all gone through. You know, finding a place to rehearse, so and so showing up late, can't get rid of him because he has a PA. You got to deal with his attitude because he's friends with the singer. You know, that kind of thing. The Commitments is a great movie. Plus, the music is incredible. This next one is actually not a movie. It's a documentary. Tom Dowd and the Language of Music, 2003. So for all you that may not know, Tom Dowd was the head engineer for Atlantic. Really the guy who engineered all the greats. He engineered, you know, Ray Charles, Clapton, Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, Skynyrd. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. He had a big part in what was back then called like race records, but a lot of the rhythm and blues stuff. The great thing about this one is, especially for people like us that are engineers, you get to see one of the great engineers at his job. So towards the middle of the film, he actually busts out Layla, the original reel-to-reel, zeroes out the console and starts remixing it right in front of your eyes. I had no idea that Layla only had 4 drum parts. Not just that, I didn't even know that it was just Clapton. Sorry, that it wasn't just Clapton. I didn't know that there was other guitar players playing that song with him. So outside of that, and plus Tom Dowd gives his whole backstory, which is really incredible. I had no idea that he actually worked on the Manhattan Project. So he was actually like a real nuclear physicist, but actually knew so much that once he left the government, he wasn't allowed to like work in the private sector anymore. So he had to literally take a step back, and for him, a step back was head engineer in Atlantic. So a great story of a great, fabulous engineer, and I can't recommend this movie any higher. Tom Dowd, The Language of Music, 2003. Along the lines of Tom Dowd is another documentary film, Standing in the Shadows of Motown. This one is, to me, is along the same lines of Searching for Sugar Man, the Rodriguez story about having your dream come true, but you're still outside of the dream. Standing in the Shadows of Motown, it's about the Funk Brothers. If you don't know who the Funk Brothers are, look them up. The Funk Brothers is a team of cats that did the session players that were the true engine of Motown. They did all the Motown hits. And every time I see this movie, there's this great scene where they're talking about being at a restaurant, and they lived so outside the dream. And this is the example. They're at a restaurant, and My Girl starts to play, right? And the actual guitar player is sitting there with the actual other musicians that recorded that song, and the waitress is taking their order, and he hears himself play over the speakers, and he looks up to the waitress, and you could see where he was just about to mouth, "Hey, that's me." And the rest of the band kind of makes fun of him, and they're like, "Hey, you were actually gonna tell her that was you?" You know, kind of like, come on, dude, like, we live outside the dream. Nobody knows who we are. And that's the reality of it. These guys recorded more number one hits than the Beatles, Elvis, and the Stones combined. these guys wrote. These guys played and recorded more number one hits than all those guys put together. But yet, nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows who they are. They were just session players that missed the spotlight. Much like Rodriguez in Searching for Sugar Man, they missed the spotlight. All their dreams came true. They just never got to realize the dream. You know, it's like the dream took a life of its own and unfortunately left these guys behind. Great documentary. You get to see these guys talk about all the sessions they played on. They get together. They bring in some featured artists to come sing these songs. And, they jam them out. And I think, and the last one. And this one by far is probably the funniest one out of all these. Because there's some really, really funny ones. Spinal Tap. Oh my God. Spinal Tap is super hilarious. A Mighty Wind is super hilarious. But Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, 2016. How ridiculous fame can be. This movie is hilarious. And the music's great. Really and truly, probably my second choice for best soundtrack. Every song is great, but every song is also hilarious. And if there's one thing that I love, it's funny songs. For some reason, great songs that just happen to be funny, to me, are golden. So Pop Star is, again, a bunch of friends that get together and they make it big, but it's almost like a mockumentary because there's so many parts. Like, there's this one classic scene where they're like at a stadium and they're doing sound check. Who hasn't been there at sound check? And this guy's like, yeah, man, he's showing his setup, and his setup is amazing. He's got this keyboard and he's got, this setup and that setup and this and that and whatever. And they're like, yeah, man, what do you use for, the show? And he's like, oh, my iPod. Because everything's playback nowadays, which is hilarious. And then, of course, all the other stuff, the pomposity, the pomposity of pop music is on display in this movie, and it is hilarious. I mean, one of the funniest movies that you could ever experience. I do want to mention one honorable mention that almost made the list, but it's a TV series. And it's from one of my favorite bands, Tenacious D, the D, not Pick of Destiny, not any of the movies they made. They actually had an HBO series called, I think it was called The Adventures of Tenacious D. That's my honorable mention. If you can, you're going to have to dig for this one. It's a series they did for HBO, and every episode had one incredible song or the building of the song or whatever. Anyway, the music, of course, which is the main feature of what we're talking about, the music just rocked. It's a really, really, really good HBO series. If you like Tenacious D, the majority of this HBO series wound up becoming the first album for Tenacious D. Out of these top 10, if let's say you've never seen any of these and you had to just see one of them, by far my suggestion would be Searching for Sugar Man. All the other ones, they're pretty common stories. The nobodies that became somebody. Some are documentaries, some are comedies. They all kind of belong to subgroups, but I guarantee you Searching for Sugar Man is probably the one to watch because you've never heard a story like that. I guarantee you. That story is just larger than life, and it's actually really hard to believe, but that's the best one, honestly. Out of these 10, that's the must see out of the 10. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And as far as music, man, probably The Commitments, I'd want to say that probably has the best soundtrack. Even though Hustle and Flow is pretty good. Pop Star, oh my God, Pop Star's songs are amazing. I mean, I guess all these soundtracks are great. You pick up any of these soundtracks for any of these movies, got great songs, you're going to enjoy it. That's my top 10, and in no particular order. I'll go through them again. Once, That Thing You Do, The Blues Brothers, The Commitments, Hustle and Flow, Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stoppin', Amadeus, Standing in the Shadows of Motown, and Searching for Sugar Man. Guys, hope you had a good time listening to these synopses and why I think some of these movies are fabulous. But hey, that's my top 10 movies that the music is the star. And if they're ever on TV, I stop and I watch these. Even if I can just get a clip, or even if I can just get a couple of songs, but while I'm eating or I'm in the lounge or whatever, I truly do love these top 10 movies. All right, guys, hanging out with Chops at gmail.com. Drop me a line. Got any show ideas? Love what I do? Hate what I do? Let me know. Catch you on the next one.
Questions asked to no one at all. Hanging out till we crawl. We're hanging out with Chops. Time just never stops. Answers fade like drops on a broken ticking clock.